Frontios, the third serial of Doctor Who's 21st season, first broadcast in four twice-weekly parts from the 26th of January to the 3rd February 1984. Now, for those who've been watching my channel recently, you may remember that the last classic review I uploaded was Resurrection of the Daleks, or if you're watching this from the playlist, then Resurrection of the Daleks should be the next one up, given that it's the next serial. But honestly, that's how time travel works. So I ended up doing Resurrection of the Daleks first and Frontios the second. But anyway, the Fifth Doctor, played once again by Peter Davison, and his companions Tegan Javanka, played by Janet Fielding, and Vizsla Turlow, played by Mark Strixon, are seemingly approaching a planet known as Frontios, where the kind of last strings of humanity are kind of clinging onto this planet trying to survive. Now, the Doctor, knowing the Time Lord rules, states that this is one occasion they probably shouldn't get involved with. Given it's something that needs to happen on its own, what happens there needs to happen. However, eventually the kind of gravitational pull of the planet pulls them down onto it. Now, of course, on there, they find the last strings of humanity, including the leader, Plantagenet, played by Jeff Rawle, his second-in-command, Brazen, played by Peter Gilmore, their kind of next in line, Range, played by William Lucas, and Ranger's daughter, Norna, played by Leslie Dunlop, among a host of other characters who, they don't exactly welcome the Doctor and his companions to the planet with open arms. I mean, last strings of humanity, what can you really expect? A welcome home parade? No. They are, of course, sceptical of these people, and eventually the Doctor and his companions end up pretty much getting stranded on Frontios when the TARDIS is seemingly destroyed, leaving only a hat stand that the Doctor had previously been moving about. Now, they try and find a way to for one point, try to survive Frontios, which is being apparently in quite a lot of trouble as it's being bombarded with asteroids, and they're seemingly preparing for a war against other planets, I think. But what's really coming for them is not from above, but actually from below, as they manage to find a series of tunnels leading underneath the planet's surface. And in these tunnels that have been dug, they suddenly find these creatures called tractators, led by the leader, Gravis. Now, think of them like giant woodlice, and you pretty much got it. They're great, big, kind of insectoid-like creatures with antennae that is revealed they can control kind of parts of the planet's gravity. And they've pretty much taken the previous leader of the planet, a man named Revere, and kind of hooked him into their machinery, but he's kind of slowly dying. Soon he'll be useless to them. So they're planning to kind of kidnap a load of people until they can find somebody to pilot their kind of mining equipment that they need. What they ultimately plan to do is create kind of a ring of tunnels. Once they've completed the tunnels, that will allow them to use their machinery to essentially create a gravity ring that will allow them to planet Frontios. I mean, harking back to something John Sims Master says in The End of Time Part 2, he's got enough weapons to turn planet Earth into a warship, and that's essentially what the Tractators want to do. They want to turn Frontios into a warship so they can go across the universe and take over a load of other planets, which is actually quite sinister. Now, one thing I will say about this story is that one Chris Chibnall story that he wrote in 2010 is, of course, the Silurian story, The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood. But with The Hungry Earth, I feel if they gave that title to Frontios at the time, I mean, fair enough, Chris Chibnall wasn't around yet, but if they swapped out the title Frontios for The Hungry Earth, I think it could have still fit. I mean, one thing that does get brought up a lot in the episode is the fact that people say the ground is hungry and that it killed their previous leader, Revere. And I can definitely see how much people can rely on their leaders in times like this. I mean, when everyone believes that Plantagenet is dead after he seemingly disappears, sucked into the ground, people end up going berserk, trying to kill and take as many supplies as they can, which, thinking as humanity, while we like to think we'd all be a little more calm and reserved in situations like this, it is kind of haunting to see that's the way we turned out. I mean, once again, the characters are all lovely. I mean, they all work very well together. I mean, Plantagenet is kind of your typical douche at the start, but then over time, as he gets to know the Doctor, Tegan, and Vizsla, or Turlo, he does actually become quite an agreeable guy. Range is ultimately the most agreeable out of all of them, and you can tell that while he does do some bad things, and he is kind of a bit gruff and stern, he is doing it out of love most of the time, especially for his daughter Norna, played by Leslie Dunlop. Once again, she's one of those characters that, once again, you can tell she doesn't always like what she's doing, but she does it because she fears retribution from the others, but she ends up working very well with them. And they actually do manage to work in some stuff with Turlo here that is actually quite nice to see. He apparently has some previous encounter with the Tractators, with them having previously been to his planet and caused trouble. So he has seemingly suffered some type of childhood trauma at the hands of these things. Which is, it's nice to see him get a bit more to work with. I mean, it does result in quite a lot of the time him needing to sit down in the tunnels and him feeling a bit faint, which does result in the Doctor and Tegan end up going places without him. But at the same time, it's nice to see him provide a bit more character base. Now, the Tractator's kind of control over gravity does also make for some pretty chilling scenes, like when the Doctor and Tegan are running away from them and they manage to actually pull them back using the gravity. It's actually quite sinister to watch. Now, overall, now when I was kind of reading through the kind of pamphlet for this, the small pamphlet that's inside each DVD, it also said that this was one which is considered one of the more darker Doctor Who stories, as not everyone is going to get out of this alive, and yeah, I can kind of see that, but at the same time, I don't think there's as much death and darkness in it as well you might see in other Doctor Who stories. So I can see why people make consider this one darker, but I also think they probably overgilded the lily. Overall, Frontios I think is a decent story. I wouldn't say it's one of Doctor Who's best, but you know what? For the 1980s, for one single storyline, and coming towards the end of one of the series, I think, or actually the halfway point, I think this is a pretty good story. Now, with what will be my next Doctor Who story I review? Well, once again, I've got an idea, I've got a plan. Whether I follow through with it, well, we'll just have to wait and see. But until then, that was Frontios. A decent story, I'd check it out at least once. Anyway, until next time, see ya.